Before we start, this is a heads up to let you guys know that we use explicit language and content.
Go! Alright, so I guess in this episode we're going to do a little bit different format. Kind of question and answer, one-on-one discussion style setup, but in separate spaces.
Yeah, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to ask Mark and Dan the same questions, but just at different times. So it's going to be kind of like an interview kind of style. Just let us know what you guys think, if you like it better this way, if you like it better the other way. Doesn't matter with us. Questions are going to be around the same style, still a discussion, but instead of all three of us, it's just going to be me and Dan first, and then I'll do Mark next.
Alright, question one.
So let's get started. Question one is, how do you deal with stress? And he has left the room.
Is that a solid answer? Depends on what's going on around me. I'm probably not the right guy to ask about that. I handle it well, but it's diagnosable. So, yeah. There is a skill set that you can develop to delay your reactions. But what ends up happening is you never come back down into the moment. So, let's say something happens, some kind of stimulus, car wreck, fist fight, mugging, whatever, and you develop that skill set so that you don't react to it right then. You stay on guard all the time. And when something happens again, once you've developed the skill set, you don't go into fight or flight, you contemplate as you're responding, rather than just responding. And when you stay in that zone long enough, you're detached. You do it so long that you end up getting detached from everything, even things that you want to be present for, and that becomes its own problem. Then at that point you're dealing with PTSD. So it depends on the stress. If it's physical and immediate, everything else doesn't get my attention, and I lean in. If it is urgent and not physical, I try to slow everybody else down. And if it is not urgent but physical, I keep my eyes and ears open for things that are urgent and more physical and prioritize that. Level 1, level 2, and now we're at level 3. But I do stay focused on it. I return to it as soon as I can. And anything less than that really doesn't matter. You can just put it on your to-do list at whatever interval your list is, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever, appropriate to whatever the, quote, stressor, end quote, would be. So, let's say you need to hit a deadline to apply for enrollment at the university, wherever you're choosing. Okay, well, there's a date on that. And there's some stress associated with doing it or not doing it, or not getting it in on time, or not getting accepted, or whatever, depending on where you're going. or not going, and that date can either loom over you like Damocles' sword, or you can knock it out and turn it into a win. So where do you put it in your day? Do you, and this at this point we're into personal choice. Do you schedule time for it? Do you wake up, drink your coffee, and start? Do you stay up until it's done and then crash out? Well, that's up to you. What I do is take control of it by telling it where in my day it's going to show up. You know, let's say there's a job application that needs to be, the job opening is going to close at Friday at 5 p.m. Okay, well, between now and Friday at 5 p.m., I need to set aside 30, 45 minutes to polish my resume, put in the application, make sure it's submitted, make a phone call, follow up, and then get a game plan together how I'm going to check in, whatever. So I try to go for the first half of the week. It's Monday right now. So I try to say, okay, if my deadline is Friday at 5 p.m., I'm going to have it in by Wednesday at 5 p.m. Now, when can I do that? And the stress goes away because you've taken control of the whole situation. Now, if Wednesday at 5 p.m. rolls around and that's my personal deadline, and I had, scheduled it for Tuesday morning and that didn't happen, and then Wednesday morning and that didn't happen, and oh my God, Wednesday evening and that didn't happen, well, the stress gradually comes back. And I have to decide every time that gets ratcheted up where I'm going to put it in my priorities. But the process of deciding where to put it in your priorities is taking control back, and some of that stress gets alleviated in that step. If stress builds up, that happens a lot. People don't like to admit it, but it's easy to walk away from a stressful situation with the stress and not be satisfied with the fact that the danger is gone. That opens the door for that PTSD demon, shell shock. There's a bunch of names for it. Jabberwocky. I have a theory about that poem being an ancient description of battling PTSD, but I'll get into that later. What can happen is you leave the door open to the stress that comes with having an unfinished task that's important. Eventually, if you choke that down, it becomes its own stress, and that becomes a physiological thing, the same as a physical danger, and then you choke that down, and then that produces stress, and you choke that down, and pretty quickly, you just can't get out of it. So, going back to your question, how do I deal with stress? Early and often, and be definite about it. And if something has rattled me, and I walk away from the situation, and I haven't calmed down, and that's separate from an adrenaline dump. That's an important thing to remember. If you're in a situation like a car accident or a breakup is another big one that's common, more common. A situation, even if it's an argument, even if it's, I'm in a metal box and it twists around me, that's scary. But when you get out of the house after the argument, when you get out of the car after the fender bender, there's this come down off the adrenaline dump. In the moment you'll get an adrenaline dump, and to me it feels like somebody hit me in the sternum or the solar plexus with a fistful of ice. And And, you pull your elbows in and you get small. That's your lizard brain taking over. You'll notice it next time it happens. Oh, yeah, okay, that's my fight or flight response kicking in. I'm deciding whether or not to fight or fly. Okay, cool. You do what you need to do, and then usually 20, 30 minutes later, if there's only one stimulus, the adrenaline kind of goes out of your system and you crash, and you're still a little anxious. At some point, you'll take an inventory like, oh, I still have all of my fingers, I still have all my toes. You look around, sometimes things seem kind of hazy. You'll take a deep breath. Maybe your pulse will be really loud in your ears. And you'll realize, okay, I'm not in danger anymore, and your brain will take an inventory of your body after that. And usually I check again after I've slept, which might be 20 minutes, it might be a day and a half, might be 4 days before I get to sleep. If you get to day 2, there's a problem. Check with somebody. But if I go through all that, adrenaline dump, come down, crash, sleep, I wake up, and I still feel anxious before I have a cup of coffee or, any kind of soda or stimulant or anything that everybody uses, before I do any of that, I sit in a quiet place and I check. Do I still feel up? I still feel anxious. And if I do, I deal with it right then, rather than letting it fester, because that's the stuff that becomes a problem. Are you asking about what I do, like process there?
I guess it was a very general question.
It is.
I mean, anything you want to share,
Okay.
let it out.
I have a comfy chair in my office in the corner with my back to the corner where I can see the door and the window. And it's a little weird, but that's a thing. It's my space. It's my office. I control who comes in and who goes out. Who has permission to be in my space. And everybody in the house respects that. And that's really important. Everybody in the house loves me enough to say, okay, you need to be alone. We'll give you some alone time. Thank you. That's a huge thing. And what I'll do is sit in my comfy chair, and I set my timer on my phone. I put my phone on quiet hour, so nothing is going to ring until that. And I pick a mellow... I used to use a KitchenAid timer, like egg timer, but that was harsh. And that didn't help. So what I do is pick a nice ringtone, a mellow ringtone, and set my timer for 20, 30 minutes, 10 minutes. Never less than 10, but never more than an hour. If it needs to go more than an hour, I'll just do it again later in the day. But I will set my timer, turn the lights off, and sit in the dark room with, my phone running the timer face down, and just breathe. And I'll go through a very slow inventory of, my hair's not falling out, my head's still connected, I can feel my eyebrows, I can feel my ears, I can look around, I can feel my cheeks, I can relax my jaw, and just work all the way down to your toes and remind yourself you're not in danger, and then see how you feel. And if that didn't help, look around the room. Is there anything in this space that is an immediate danger to me? And there shouldn't be. It's your space. But, am I in danger right now? No. Okay, remind yourself of that. Become very aware of the fact that you're safe here. And what I end up doing is just kind of resetting my fight or flight response. like a mousetrap. And then when that alarm goes off, sometimes it takes a half a second, sometimes it takes 30 seconds. I come out of that zone and I say, okay, I'm good now. Even if I don't quite feel it, okay, I'm better than I was before I started, and then I can go handle whatever's out there.
How do you deal with stress?
Kind of stress. Specifically, it depends on the type of stress.
Okay. First off, we'll try work stress.
Work stress. Play video games, and I blow things up in those video games.
Okay. Next up, family stress.
Depending on whether it's my kids or a family member on the same intellectual level as me, I'll either talk through whatever they're doing that is stressing me out, or I go lift weights. If they can't understand the problem, then I just go do something to blow off steam.
Okay.
But if they can understand the problem, then I work through it with them, so
Right.
that we avoid it in the future.
Right. Okay. How about like bullshit life thrown at you stress?
Depends on how shitty that stress is. Usually, I do two things. One, either go lift, run, shoot. Something that gets my heart rate going and lets me blow off steam. And then B, I talk to someone who can help me work through the issue, like mentally.
Gotcha.
So, Dan, my mom, a friend, somebody who I can blow off the steam to. And usually with those two things, I can work through it.
Okay.
So basically, have an outlet, have a person.
Gotcha. That works.
Yeah. So confidant and an outlet.
Awesome. Okay. Next question. This ought to be pretty relevant. How do you deal with anger?
Anger. Anger has been a demon of mine for a long time. Depending on the source of the anger, it depends on how I handle it, to be honest. If something is making me angry that I can change, I try to change it. If it's something about me, I try to change it. If it's just something I have to deal with, you have to find an outlet. And sometimes, and you have to control yourself, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, no matter how good you are, no matter how hard you try, you lose your temper. You've seen me lose my temper.
Mm-hmm.
And usually, I'd say 95% of the time, if you lose your temper, you have something to apologize for. So after you lose your temper, once you regain it, and you breathe for a minute, apologize for whatever you've done to whoever you've done it to. Sometimes you have nothing to apologize for because it was completely on the other party.
Okay, question 2.
All right. Question 2. How do you deal with anger?
Depends on what I'm angry about. If it is a dangerous situation, I use it. That's adrenaline. That's what rage is for. That's why we have it. If there's a time to throw haymakers, then it's a time to throw haymakers. And if it's not, then, keep your fists to yourself and try to turn it back into a discussion or abandon the entire situation. Depends on the stimulus. I don't have a problem saying, look, I'm getting really angry about this. you need to drop it. We can talk about this later, but right now, you need to drop it. If people are unreceptive, I just cut them off. If they're not any kind of a threat, I just don't talk to them. They don't exist to me anymore. I'm done. They they get nothing from me. There's zero interaction, and they're on their own because it doesn't matter. But when it does matter, I remind myself to slow down, and I become very deliberate about all of my next moves. And I think about, if I do this, what happens? If I do this, what happens? If I do this, what happens? And usually by the time I've answered that question, I have the best answer, okay, well, then this is what I ought to do, and I'm not really angry. And the more I do that, the more I find out people really just drop it. People make other people angry in the moment just to make the other person angry. If you can hold your anger in and cool it intentionally, your own emotions, I'm not going to let this dude rile me. I'm not going to let this situation make me mad. You know what? The tire shop ran down my battery because they didn't turn off my headlights while they had my car up on the rack, and, now they're telling me I have a ruined battery. I'm not going to be angry about it. I'm going to tell them to fix it. Get off your dumb ass and fix it. You're not going to sell me a battery. Because I watched you do it. I know what's going on here. That's your problem. And you become very good at saying, you know what, that's your problem. That doesn't affect me. It doesn't have anything to do with me. And I'm not going to take care of it for you. I'm not going to own it. Leave me out of it. So, practice.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
How about you?
Let me see. For stress, I kind of just try to distract myself.
Mm-hmm.
Play a couple games, or watch a couple of videos. Talk to people, talk to my roommate. Yeah, it doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't, take care of what needs to be taken care of. But
Mm-hmm.
at that moment, I'm at ease. And then whenever I come up to it a second time,
Mm-hmm.
I'm at least in a little bit of a better position than freaking out with what's on, like, the stress on my shoulders.
Yeah. Okay. That works. Put it off a little bit.
I mean, it doesn't work all the time because,
Stress is inescapable.
mm-hmm. But it works some of the time. Oh, seriously? Sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
As for anger, I usually don't get angry a lot. I'm pretty easygoing most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, lately I've been getting pretty angry for some things, but I mean, the way I deal with that is I kind of just, I don't know. I think of why it makes me angry,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think, okay, so like, if my boss is giving me really crappy hours, or, just not letting me get off whenever I'm supposed to get off,
Mm-hmm.
I think to myself, okay, what part of this situation is making me angry? Is it the actual not getting what I need or what I want kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it something else? If it's the not getting what I want, what I need, I look and I see, okay, what's the problem here? What's it causing it? And so I try to work through, what causes what, cause and effect. And if it can be helped, then I do my best to solve that. If not, then I let it take its course and, try to do what I can.
Yeah.
If it's just, people that actually make me angry,
Mm-hmm.
people are people. They're going to do what they want to do. That's
Mm-hmm.
the course of free will. I can't control people. I can't, I can't help that. So if someone wants to be a douche,
Yeah.
that's just them being a douche. That has nothing to do with me. The only thing I can do is, deal with it positively. give a smile, because if someone's trying to piss you off, then giving a smile is the worst thing that they could ever think you could do.
Yeah.
It is the best whenever someone is just like, it's just coming at you all the time, and you just smile and either laugh it off or just joke about it. Oh, their reactions are the best. And if they're like just being an asshole because they're having a bad day, then hey, maybe the smile's gonna help. Maybe the joke's gonna help. You never know.
And if not, then it just isn't going to affect you.
Exactly.
That's a good.
And like you said, it's not my problem. None of my business.
Exactly.
So why should I act like, it's my problem and it's my business?
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people want to be angry just to be angry.
Mm-hmm.
And so they bring you what they've found to validate their own decision to be angry. Their problem is they want to be angry. That's not my problem.
Mm-hmm.
Keep it away from me, man. Like a cold.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've got this third question here, and this question is pretty serious.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a buddy of mine. I'm not going to say his name, so we'll call him John.
Mm-hmm.
So John's been having some hard times lately, and his mom has just been really sick, really ill, and isn't looking too good. And he's got a girlfriend, but his girlfriend is also having some psychological issues.
Okay.
Like, she's just got some stuff going on with, her brain, and he's dealing with depression and anxiety, every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And what is your advice to him?
Split with a girl if it's safe. If it's not going to cause an immediate danger to him or her, tell her, look, I got to take a break. Not even we. I need to sort out my own skull. I'll be back in 2 weeks, but I'm checking out right now. I'm not going to do anything other than just take care of myself. So if you want to stick around 2 weeks, great. If not, okay. It is what it is. Because constant anxiety will cause depression. Constant anxiety brings on cortisol. Cortisol, the stress hormone, is the death hormone, actually. Cortisol, and I have another theory that elevated cortisol levels over extended periods of time increase brain plasticity, but anyway, your body has a tendency to keep amped up and stay amped up, so it keeps amped up, so it stays amped up, and that's really, really difficult to come down off of. So if there is an element in his life that's causing anxiety that he can control, he should. Dial it down, take a step back, ease off a little bit, whatever you want to call it. Just take a step back, and taking control of his own stress level anywhere in his life will make him feel empowered. So he can walk into dealing with the other situations with a little more confidence. And when he runs into something that he can't handle, well, that's not his fault. So it's not his failing. He just can't handle it. Good, bad, or otherwise, the outcome isn't really on him. I had an ex, being really honest here, I had a girlfriend, basically a fiance. We were talking about getting married. We broke up, and she tried to kill herself on my porch. Went to her car, took a bunch of pills, and then wanted me to stand out on the porch and talk to her while she crashed. And I ended up calling the cops and checking her into a mental hospital.
Wow.
Yeah. That was rough. Didn't mean I didn't care about her. Didn't mean I didn't love her.
Right.
You know, I just couldn't handle that. So we broke up, and then it blew up. You know what? She lived. And I lived. And we went separate ways, and, you know, I think 2 years later I ran into a mutual acquaintance of a mutual acquaintance kind of thing. And they said, "Hey, I saw her the other day. You guys still together?" No. No, we're not. But she was alive. You know, good news, I'm off the hook. She didn't mean to raise my stress levels. She didn't mean to be anything other than a good girlfriend. But I had zero peace in my life, so we just weren't a good fit, so it needed to end. If you're not married to her, that's a viable option as the door. And they, you know, you can't do anything about your mom's health. You can't really do anything about immediate stressors, but you can do something about where you're headed. And if you're in a relationship that's going to be drama and you expect it, guess what? You're going to be anxious about it. And if you deal with it until your anxiety just shut up and swallow it, eventually you're going to get angry and you're going to swallow that, and that's going to turn into depression. So stop it before it blooms. And he can still do that even though it's bloomed. But, and I'm taking you on your word here, he's a friend.
Mm-hmm.
All you can do is offer advice. You can't take on his crazy.
Right.
And you can't feel responsible for that.
Right.
Go for a walk. That's another big one. Get some sunlight. People underestimate how much sunlight helps. It's huge. You know, if you can't walk around the block twice and just breathe, leave your phone. Leave your phone. Set it down on the nightstand and shut it off and walk around the block twice. You'd be amazed what that'll do for your mood. If you got to do it 3 times a day, do it. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. I told him something along those lines as well.
Don't tell her to go get checked for anything. Bipolar. You know, don't make any suggestions. Don't make any suggestions. And don't break up with her in your living room.
I assume he's close to his mother.
Very close.
And he's close to his girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both a large stressor in his life. So he needs to find a couple of days a week to get away from everything.
So find some, like, sort of mini vacation
Peace. He needs peace
every now and then.
at least once a week. To where he can sort through his own thoughts. Because that's going to wear on him. And he needs to be able to sort through his emotions and get to his logical center so that he doesn't make mistakes. And if he cannot handle both of them, he will have to drop one. You can't drop your mother, so it's pretty obvious what he'll have to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if he has the stress of that can lead him, a person, to making very bad decisions about their own life, and he needs someone watching out for him to make sure he's not making bad decisions. And if he starts having thoughts that could be physically dangerous, definitely needs to talk to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Because that can drive you to that. The amount of stress it sounds like that young man's under. Yeah. That's my advice.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you very much.
And that concludes this week's episode of Man School Podcast. Thank you guys for sitting with us, and be sure to give us constructive feedback or a question of your own at manschoolpodcast@gmail.com. That's manschoolpodcast@gmail.com, all lowercase. Thanks again, and always think for yourself.
Anything else?
You want to explain your theories that you mentioned earlier, or are you going to keep us all in suspense?
A quick version, if you want to reprogram somebody, you increase their stress level and reduce their feelings of ability or effectiveness. So the first thing that happens when somebody goes to boot camp, and they've been, that whole industry, the war machine, everybody's war machine, I'm not just talking about the U.S., everybody has been perfecting this since before Sparta. They had documented versions of this. Spartans would start training at 7.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that you're as vulnerable as you are at 19 without any sense of purpose or direction. But when you get in somebody's face and scream and tell them they're doing it wrong and tell them they can't react, that increases cortisol levels. And guess what? Their defenses to your suggestions, be they subliminal or overt, are increased. They're way more susceptible. Everybody's way more susceptible when you're in a stressful state than when you're calm. Somebody just walks up to you on the street and starts yelling, you go, hey, get away from me. Who are you?
Mm-hmm.
But if you are in a situation socially where you can't react, that's going to bump up your cortisol levels and you're going to get reprogrammed. Well, the opposite is true also. If you're on a military base and somebody shells it, well, you're going to learn that while you're here, you need to be ready to hit the dirt. While I'm behind these walls, I need to be ready for these walls to come down. And so that same person who went through boot camp and then got sent to a deployment had their cortisol levels increased, were presented with a solution to the fight or flight response stimulus that was appropriate for that situation twice, and then never told, hey, you can dial it down now. You're back home. You're safe. You're not in the war zone anymore. You're not in, fill in the blank. You're not in that space where you have to be on guard all the time. And then cars used to backfire a lot. Doesn't happen as much now as it used to, but that same person who went through boot camp deployment, they get home and a car drives by and backfires a little bit, and without thinking about it, they hit the dirt. Well, if they're having ice cream with their family, the kids think they're being weird. There's ice cream on their shirt. They're pulling people down out of the table, to save their lives. Well, nobody put them back in a stressful state and said, you're okay. And what I've seen is the response that you get from somebody with PTSD was learned while they were under stress. So it's not a big jump to connect those two dots. When you're in the physiological state where you're under stress, you're going to learn faster. And so you're programming your brain to short circuit all of these other higher level brain functions like reasoning and just react. That's reprogramming as brain plasticity, and the response to that stress stimulus is increased cortisol levels with some other stuff, adrenaline, epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine. if you do it right. So those, yeah. And then if you live, you get dopamine, which is the same chemical that you get when your phone dings or your your table at the casino or your machine at the casino goes off. An alcoholic gets a drink, that's a shot of dopamine. A smoker takes their first drag, that's a shot of dopamine. If you live, it's a shot of dopamine. Well, that puts a cap on the end of the lesson. And so people don't freak out and then go do paperwork, which is, cops. If you get shot at, you deal with it, and then you go do paperwork. Well, they don't do anything after that part where they have that moment where like, I'm alive! They stop that short circuit with the moment where they get that hit of dopamine because they're alive, and then they can go right back into having ice cream with their family. So, I think because of when the shift happens, I think increased cortisol levels increase brain plasticity, the moldability of your programming. But I don't know of any studies that have looked into that. I don't know of anybody at the VA that would be interested in looking into it, but I haven't really had those conversations. I've talked to one psychiatrist who was interested, but he wasn't publishing at the time he was practicing, so it would have been really, really difficult for him to do a study. But hopefully, we can find something out about that in the near future. Maybe help a whole lot of people.